Classic Restos, proudly brought to you by Shannons Insurance, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, Ryco Filters, Evans Waterless Coolants, and Pace Farm. Hello and welcome to another fab episode of Classic Restos, and I have returned to the National Motor Museum here in Birdwood, South Australia. Why have I returned? Well, they have had some amazing inclusions since my last visit that I'm busting to show you. And you'll get even more excited right after this. It's thanks to Shannons. Ask about multi-policy discounts and sign up for the Shannons Club. Call 134646 for a quote and see more at shannons.com.au. And Heron Forbes has the range. Buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. The National Motor Museum here in Birdwood is not just a tribute to the automotive legacy here in Australia, but it's also the finishing point for the iconic Bay to Birdwood event. Now, on last week's episode of Classic Restos, we featured exactly that. And if you missed it, here's just some of an event that attracts over 1,700 classic vehicles. With the recent closing of Holden here in Australia, well, that in itself has left a huge tug on the heartstrings for countless thousands of die-hard enthusiasts, not just from an economical standpoint, but from an emotional one as well. Well, as the old sales slogan said many years ago, people trust Holden, we can also trust the National Motor Museum here in Birdwood to come up with this. Welcome to the reassembled display. Yes, sir. If one place in Australia can pull off something like this, Birdwood did it. Reassembled. With the doors closing at the Elizabeth Holden Assembly Plant, the National Motor Museum has launched this as Australia's automotive manufacturing journey. This is a new permanent exhibition with the aim to preserve the Holden workers' legacy and the story of the assembly plant that has sustained thousands of South Australian families. This large-scale project comprises the installation of 7 stages of the assembly line from the Elizabeth plant suspended from the ceiling of the National Motor Museum. Each station will carry a vehicle at a different stage of assembly. The story of the process is communicated via video projects on the vehicles and screen-based information suspended from the vehicles. And well, down here at floor level, it's as though we are in the production plant. But this is it. This is the last chance that we're ever going to get to experience the feel of Holden production here in Australia. But it will always be kept in our minds, the legacy, thanks to this incredible reassembled display. With me now I have Mick. How you doing, buddy?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Fletch?
Good, mate, good. Now, look, you all play an integral part of all the displays here at the museum, but I'm picking on you for this one because reassembled, that is just so unique. How did you acquire it from Holden?
Well, we acquired part of it from Holden, so that's actually a project that started more or less the same time I started at the museum. Yep. There were voicings about what we would do when the museum, when Holden manufacturing shut down, and could we possibly take part of the production line and somehow represent it here in the museum.
Okay, Mick, we turn up here at the museum, we come and have a look at reassembled. What can we expect to see? Walk us through.
There's 2 levels to reassembled. There's what happens on the top floor, suspended from our ceiling, and what happens on the ground floor. So on the top floor, you've got, starting from a unpainted body shell all the way through to a finished car, you've got something that represents the assembly line at the Elizabeth factory, the Holden Elizabeth factory in 2017. So state-of-the-art modern manufacturing when it finished in Australia. On the ground floor, you've got 6 or 7 actually vehicles, so to mirror the ones on top. The ones on the bottom are a chronology of Australian manufacturing of cars. So we start with one that's a little bit of an off program, so not counted in the 6, but before there was sort of assembly lines in Australia. A bloke in Tanunda made himself a car, probably based off some old drawings. It's got a red gum clutch. It's a bit of a toy almost, but apparently quite a good car. And then we've got from your Ford Model T that I'm looking at right now, through to the first Holden, and then some more important cars, the Falcon, the Commodore, things that are really, marked Australian manufacturing history of the car. And then we've also got, there's a breakout room that kind of represents the more intimate side of the factory, what it's like to be in the factory. So if you walk through there, you get to see a few of the tools of the trade and the way that people would have set up their lockers. And down the track, we haven't gotten to it yet, but there will be little toys and games that you can play to sort of get a bit of a hands-on feel.
A nice touch too, like even the workers' coffee mugs on the pegboard.
Yeah, I know that. I like that one, and I'm pretty sure that's quite true to it. I've been to the factory myself quite a number of times, and it is, it's where people work. It's where they spend half their life, so it's quite personal.
Mick, great catching up. Now, a few months back, you're on the episode as well. We chatted about bush mechanics. So, you're a bit of a clever tooth on the wheel here at Birdwood.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot happening at the moment, and I've got a few exhibitions, a few I've done, one that I've just finished right now, and a few in the pipeline, so there's a lot happening.
Well, keep up the great work. You're watching the episode. If you have not been to the National Motor Museum here at Birdwood, it's just one of those things you've got to do, right, Mick?
Yeah, it's a must-do, particularly if you're interested in motors, but you don't have to be a rev head to come, so, make your way over.
Okay, Mick, thanks very much, buddy. Well done.
Cheers, Fletch. Thanks very much.
It doesn't get much more traditional than this. A 48 FX215. Now, it says on the board it's the number 1 Holden. That doesn't actually mean that it's body number 1. Back in the time, from a publicity standpoint, Holden back then would do, say, 1 to 10 for the media, for publicity and what have you. This is, in fact, body number 6, but it is in the first batch of 48 215s to roll off the production line, which I think is incredibly iconic, and it's just something else for you to see when you visit here at the National Motor Museum here in Birdwood, South Australia.
We've always had a few cars. They're all special. The T-Bird.
Oh, that's mine.
The Combi for when we want to get away. The XR8.
It's going to be a classic.
They're all insured with Shannons,
We've also got Shannon's home and contents cover.
which helps protect our automotive collectibles, tools and memorabilia in the home and garage. If you're motoring enthusiasts like us, it's got to be
Shannon's.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
Australia's changed over the last 80 years, and Ryco Filters has changed with it. But one thing stayed the same: Ryco's commitment to develop and test all our filters under Australian conditions. Today, we're proudly celebrating our 80-year commitment to a design philosophy that ensures all oil, air and fuel filters meet or exceed vehicle manufacturers' specifications, delivering genuine quality and performance you can trust. Ryco Filters, the professional's choice.
If you have a restoration project, Heron Forbes has the tools that you need. Look at these restoration products: shrinker stretchers, dollies, mallets, bead rollers, profile gauges, professional panel restoration kits, and so much more. Now, I warn you, enter at your own risk, because you will end up buying something. So come along to your Cap City store or browse and buy online at machineryhouse.com.au, because Heron Forbes has the range.
Evans Waterless Engine Coolant. Simple to install and stays good for the life of the engine. Suitable for all engine types, Evans contains no water, eliminating corrosion, vapour pressure and overheating. With a boiling point of 190 degrees Celsius, there's no application or environment too extreme. evanscoolants.com.au. Water for drinking, Evans for cooling.
Another very interesting display here at the National Motor Museum at Birdwood, of course, has to do with transport, and it goes back to the history of the travelling salesman, the hawker, so to speak. And to tell us more, here's Michelle.
Yes, Fletch, this is the Travelling Emporium display. It was the last project I did as a curator here at the National Motor Museum. So the display is about the story of hawkers. Now, do you know what hawkers are, Fletch?
Yes, travelling sales reps, right?
Yes, travelling sales reps, that's exactly it. So we have two vehicles in our collection that tell this sort of story. So one was owned by Harry Monsoor, and he was doing his hawker days around the 1900s, 1926 is when he stopped. And then we've also got Syd Graeber, who started a little bit later during the Depression. And so both of them sold very different items, but it's still all the same sort of things. It's things that country people can use. And so Syd Graeber, he sold clothing mainly, so buttons and fabric and all that sort of thing, while Harry Monsoor sold miscellaneous objects from like boots to sweets to cigarettes, and the list goes on. So they both sort of went around South Australia. Harry Monsoor went to the Flinders Ranges, while Syd Graeber was around the Murray Basin area. And they met up with people and they sold them items that they just couldn't get to the shops for quick enough for. So that's why.
When you think of the road conditions back then, if they had roads in some cases, just dirt tracks, the trucks behind us that they had. I've also got so much respect for the early immigrants in this country because, as you alluded to earlier, they came here and this is the type of work that they found to make ends meet. You know, get a truck and get out there and sell stuff in the towns and the villages.
Yeah, so Harry Monsoor was actually an immigrant from Lebanon, and he came over here and he started doing his hawking with a donkey and cart. And then eventually he made enough money to upgrade to the van that we can see there. And so it definitely was an occupation that was mainly taken up by immigrants, which was a positive thing, but also when the white policy was happening in particular, it was a bit of a negative thing. There was a very big stereotype that all hawkers were immigrants and that they were trying to steal jobs and etc., etc.
Well, that's, I guess, where it goes to with the salesperson becoming the con man as well. Like you know, be careful whether to trust that one or not.
No, there's actually a few like newspaper articles that talk about hawkers coming to the doors of housewives and pestering them to buy things, and the husband's away at work and the hawker's just knocking on a door and like all these things, trying to get her to buy stuff, and the woman feels uncomfortable. So all the stories about the classic salesman, it's kind of funny to look back on now, but at the time maybe it was a reality.
I think it's amazing, though, too, on your part, the initiative that you have taken, number one, to come up with the idea for this display, and then your attention to detail to carry it through. Now, you've got the boxes out the back that have, you lift the lid, representing the smell of each article sold. Where did you get that idea from?
I was trying to think outside of the box. I was trying to think of a way that visitors could come and sort of interact with the story, and I think smell is a really good one, because most museums, we're trying to get into experiencing things through smell, but it's quite hard to do. So with the display that's there, I chose some things that sort of maybe hawkers might have smelt like. So you've got in there like the leather of the shoes that Harry sold. The last one is horse manure, because in the early days when hawkers went around, they would have a carriage with horses. And so I was sort of thinking if horses were standing with the carriage for quite a while, there might be that smell of manure. And so when you're going shopping at the hawker van, it might be not as pleasant experience as you might think it would be. But yeah, it was just something a bit different, something fun.
Okay, here we are, Michelle. Sniffer boxes, give it a bit of a burl. This one here, leather. Yep, definitely leather, no doubt about it, no question. This one here, garbolic soap. Yeah, sweet, it smells like soap. This one here, minties. We all know the smell of minties, right? Yep, that is spot on. And then one here, got a bit of horse droppings here, the smell of that. Oh, yes, that is definitely horse shit. Oh, God. Now, Michelle, time for some information on the vehicles here. Now, we've got a 1926, what's the make?
Graham Brothers G-Boy. But generally what happened with the hawker vehicles is that they would get the chassis of a van and they would build their own like body on top. So they would use a way of like making it all compartments so they could fit all their objects in that they were going to sell and things like that. So pretty sure that Harry Monsoor built the body of the van.
That's amazing. I mean, what initiative back in those times as well, to deck your transport vehicle out and then off you go, probably gone weeks at a time or many, many days at a time into the scrub and to sell your wares. Now, something interesting hovering around the back wheel of this truck. Michelle, what's the story there? I think I can work it out, but I'll let you tell us.
Yeah, so Harry would often put a lot of things in his van, make it a bit too heavy. So when there's stories about when he was travelling with his family, going on his trips, because sometimes they come with him, if he was driving up a hill and he missed a gear, the van was so heavy that it would start to like go backwards, and the regular foot brake just wouldn't work that well. It couldn't hold the weight. And then so he invented his own emergency brake, which is a log that goes behind the rear wheel, and it's got a string tied to it that goes into like the cab area, like where the passengers and the driver is. And so when they were going backwards, he would pull on the string and it would untie a knot and drop the log, which would jam under the back wheel, and then so it would sort of skid to a stop. But I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore, and that we do have our handbrakes. But yeah, pretty crazy.
Okay, Michelle, the second truck here, a 1936 Dodge. What can you tell us?
So this van was owned by Syd Graeber. He's a Lobethal resident, which is only about 15 minutes from here in Birdwood. The story about this van is pretty interesting because he stopped his hawking in about 1966. But what he did is he drove the van fully stocked with goods into his garage at the end of the day of hawking and just left it there. And it got left there for a couple of decades. And then eventually his wife donated it to the museum. But so all the objects that are on display inside the van are actually 100% like genuine. They were the objects he sold on his day of hawking.
Well, so what was left back in those times, right in front of us here, the 100% dinky dye original items still here in the truck?
Yes, exactly, 100%. So you've still got the egg cutting thing. It's got like a red Indian kid's pistol and clothing and Dunlop heels for boots and things like that. The objects are really interesting. And I love the packaging. It's probably my favourite. Like, I know it's only about 50 years ago, but it's just still very different. It feels like a whole nother time.
Okay, Michelle, well done on your display. 10 out of 10. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to meet you, Fletch. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I spend a lot of time out here. The RT Charger's the real deal. An E49. Remember A-Charger? I've always got projects on the go, so Shannon's laid-up cover helps protect my restorations. I'm Mopar through and through. It's a passion Shannon's understands. I wouldn't insure my cars and bikes with anyone else.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
Evans Waterless Engine Coolant. Simple to install and stays good for the life of the engine. Suitable for all engine types, Evans contains no water, eliminating corrosion, vapour pressure and overheating. With a boiling point of 190 degrees Celsius, there's no application or environment too extreme. evanscoolants.com.au. Water for drinking, Evans for cooling.
Australia's changed over the last 80 years, and Ryco Filters has changed with it. But one thing stayed the same: Ryco's commitment to develop and test all our filters under Australian conditions. Today, we're proudly celebrating our 80-year commitment to a design philosophy that ensures all oil, air and fuel filters meet or exceed vehicle manufacturers' specifications, delivering genuine quality and performance you can trust. Ryco Filters, the professional's choice.
Heron Forbes Machinery House has been family owned and operated for over 85 years, and it's easy to see why. And with a range like this, you cannot go wrong. Planning on welding? Look at these welding tables and clamps, air compressors and different air tools, sandblasting cabinets, through to spray guns. Everyone is welcome at Machinery House, and they're also open Saturday mornings. Their range of machine tools are workshop tested. There are competitive freight rates around Australia, and you can buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. So remember, Hare & Forbes has the range. There's no doubt about this museum. I mean, it's never ending. I mean, there's just so much to see and do. We've just walked about, 20 metres from the main building. Here we are in the 1920s garage. How you doing, Matt?
I'm good, thanks, Fletch. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. Now, give us a quick rundown of what's going on in here.
Fletch, this was the original bag store for the flour mill back in the 1920s, and it's been converted by our volunteers into a simulation of a 1920s average country garage. In this case, it's Mershall's garage, and Mershall's were the local Ford dealer, and they were the first Ford dealer outside metropolitan Adelaide in South Australia. So the volunteers thought that that was an appropriate theme to follow through with. So it's a typical 1920s garage, is what you would find. There's, you know, pretty basic stuff. There's nothing high tech. There's no black boxes, no magic tricks. It's all just mechanical work. And in fact, there's still a lot of blacksmithing and horse-drawn vehicle type technology and techniques involved in that period. There are some new things like spark plug cleaners and machines like that obviously wouldn't have been around prior to that period. But your average country garage at that time was pretty basic. Mind you, the mechanics of the vehicles were pretty basic. So,
But Matt, the stuff worked though, didn't it?
sure, well, it had to be maintained more regularly than it would be today. It was obviously simpler to maintain, and that helped a lot.
But yet, still back in that time, it was looked upon as cutting-edge technology.
Oh, no doubt, absolutely. But these guys, in many cases, would have had to have converted, maybe quite not from horse-drawn. Some would have already been brought up with the motor cars. But in many cases, they would have converted between horse-drawn vehicles, you know, fixing a bent axle with blacksmithing tools, to fixing a Model T Ford's ignition system. So it was pretty much across the board. They were inventive, they had to be, because spare parts would have been 2, 3, 4, 5 days away at least, and that was only if they came out of metropolitan Adelaide. If they had to come from Sydney or Geelong or somewhere, even longer. So they had to make do and mend with best they could in many cases.
There's none of this, 2 deliveries a day.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Nothing came in a nice sealed bag with a nice label on it. So,
Unbelievable. Matt, thank you so much for your time here, and just giving us a quick rundown on this section. Like I said earlier, this is a place that you could spend a couple of days and just, just walk aimlessly and take it all in. There's just so much here to see.
yeah, that's right. And, you know, if you've got the time to be in Adelaide, spend some time up here. Spend a day or half a day even up here and just wandering around and having a look and seeing what, you know, new ideas and things that you might have seen.
Matt, what can I say? The 1920s garage here at the National Motor Museum at Birdwood. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Nice to meet you, Fletch.
Well, Fletch, I think that the National Motor Museum is one of Australia's unique cultural icons in the world of motoring history. It's a unique venue. It's got so much to offer the citizens of Australia, especially those who collect vehicles. As you saw at the Bay to Birdwood the other day, that was the reason we undertake events such as the Rock and Roll Rendezvous, which you saw in April and kindly came and filmed, and the Bay to Birdwood, is that we actually believe it's like an engagement of the historical collection that is within the community. The other people who've collected their precious cars and bikes, and they get to look at each other's and sort of check it out and you know chew the fat, so to speak. And then there's also the general public who come along just to marvel at the spectacle of the size, the epic size of the Bay to Birdwood. There's 1,750 vehicles. At the National Motor Museum too, we're busy most weekends with historic vehicle clubs attending, having their picnics, having their rally points, having a meeting stopover, lunch stopover. We have all sorts of vehicles come up on weekends, and so those are the different historical motoring clubs. But on Bay to Birdwood Day and on Rock and Roll Rendezvous Day, it's come one, come all, and they all meet together. And so where do these clubs ever really get to meet each other, from rival clubs, from Volvos to Camaros, you know? They get to look at each other's work and all this sort of thing. So, because usually their activities is quite focused on their own clubs and what they do. Well, Reassembled is one of the things I'm probably the most proud of at the moment as the director of the museum. It's an epic tale of Australian automotive manufacturing history. It's also quite spectacular. The grandeur of the 6 vehicles suspended from the ceiling of a museum. I don't think there's any. We've looked around. There's no other museum in the world that's done this. And then you've got the grandeur again of the projections and the immersive nature of the way that the designers have integrated the story of manufacturing onto the walls. And then you get down to the nitty-gritty replica of a worker's station, which just brings it down to very much that human level. Because in the end, that's what the museum is. The museum, the National Motor Museum, is a social history museum that is focused around motoring, because we've got National Motor Museum. But it's social history. And what is social history? Social history is made by people. So it's all about people.
Words cannot say enough to represent the enormity and just how good the National Motor Museum is here in Birdwood, South Australia. It's educational, it's informative, it's a tug on the heartstrings, it's everything rolled into one to make it a fantastic place for you to visit. So, when you can, try and get to Birdwood. As I say at the end of every episode of Classic Restos, no matter where you're watching from, until next week, please ride and drive safe. I'm Fletch, and I thank you very much for watching. You can like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ClassicRestosTV and watch catch-up episodes at shannons.com.au. Classic Restos, proudly brought to you by Shannons Insurance, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, Ryco Filters, Evans Waterless Coolants and Pace Farm.